So throughout the year, we've been playing with different file types, and I want to make a video sort of explaining what and why these files are. So for example, you ever noticed that whenever you're working with a part file, it always says .ipt, and then when you're working with an assembly file, it says .iam. Or if you go to File New, you'll actually see that, and we'll say File New, and you'll see, well, a part file is an IPT file. And a standard assembly file, or I say an assembly file is always a .iam, and then a drawing file is always an IDW. And then of course, you do the same thing with a presentation file, is an IPN. And these are kind of like, if you look at a Word document, you'll see a Word document is .doc always, whereas a PDF file is always .pdf, and a PowerPoint is always .ppt. And that's something you need to realize and recognize, is so you can see what type of file it is whenever you're looking at the name. It also changes the icon, by the way, so you can tell which file it is. So if I were to go to open, so for example, we can see the different types of files within here. This is obviously a drawing file because you can see that, well, you can see the icon that goes with it. But if we click on it, we can look at the name, and it is a .idw file. Whereas this one is obviously a part file, a .ipt, and this is obviously an assembly or a .iam. But then something else you might have noticed, that we always use this Campus A document. You might have wondered, why do we call it a Campus A? Well, and the reason is, hold on, let me open up A, let's go to one. The reason why it's called Campus A, well, it's because it's our campus. You might notice that it always said Austin High School on ours. A different high school might have a different name, but that's not what the A stood for. It didn't stand for Austin High School. A is the size of the paper, the sheet that we're working on. A is the size for a standard piece of printer paper. And we could change that. So we can actually look within the sheet itself. We can edit the field text if we want to, which is kind of cool. But we can look in the file or the part or the sheet. Let's see, drawing resources. We could change the sheet format from a size A. We could change it to a size B, which is a longer piece of paper. Size C is one of those big plot printer formats. So we can even open this up, and you can see, well, what does that look like? We hit OK, and you're going to see it's a much bigger file. Okay, well, and it drops different versions of this sketch on there for me, but it's a much bigger sheet of paper. It's one of those plot printers. Of course, size D and size E are also going to be bigger, and we could do sheet A landscape instead of portrait if we want to. We hit OK, and we look at it. Let's see what that, well, you see, well, this makes a regular standard A document without all that stuff filled in here. And this landscape is the one we usually work with. It's where the regular piece of printer paper is wide instead of narrow, instead of long. And so we can make one that's a portrait. Hit OK, and you'll see the difference. Well, now it looks like a piece of printer paper that's going long ways. It's just a normal print instead of a portrait mode, or instead of landscape mode, we're in portrait mode. So we're looking at the paper long ways instead of wide ways. And so that's the different reasons for the different types of documents that are an A drawing file versus a B drawing file and a C drawing file, and so on and so forth. Of course, it's getting bigger. There are different size drawing files for different types of prints or different pieces of paper that I would print these out on. And of course, those are the different types of files with Autodesk Inventor. Just a quick summary.